106.7 The Fan. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. MMA Nation. Your show for all things mixed martial arts, UFC, Strikeforce, and boxing here in D.C. and beyond. Number to call, 800-636-1067. Again, that number, 800-636-1067. Get at me on Twitter, twitter.com/MMA Nation. All right, going to change gears here just a little bit for one segment at least. Joining us right now on the McDonald's hotline is the managing editor of Bad Left Hook, here to talk about the latest in the boxing world, including Pacquiao Mosley, which is only 2 weeks away, and of course last night's Perez versus Darchinyan and a bunch of other stuff as well. The one and only Scott Christ joins us here on MMA Nation. What's up, Christ?
Hey, how you doing, Luke?
Good, buddy. Happy Easter to you. How are you?
Not bad, not bad.
All right. Well, first of all, let's get into last night. What a disaster, huh? First you have Agbeka, who goes down with a very legitimate injury. The poor guy seems to be very seriously injured, and I want you to tell folks exactly what it is. And then Perez goes out there, and I want to make this point about Perez, man. Listen, he obviously got crushed. I'm not here to defend him, except to say, that's not the Perez who beat Mabuza. That's not the Perez who beat Agbeka the first time. It's not even the Perez who fought Mares. What happened to him?
It looked like he was both mentally and physically unprepared for Vic Darchinyan's attack last night. When you look back to his breakout fight on US TV, of course, was Agbeka in 2009, where, CompuBox wasn't there, but myself and another one of our editors on our site estimated that Perez threw about 1,600 punches over 12 rounds. He hasn't been that guy since then, The Mabuza fight before Agbeka in South Africa was a fight he was losing, and then he stormed back in the later rounds and got a TKO in the 12th and final round. Then you look at Mares, in that fight last May, he was good. He wasn't great. He was definitely not the guy who fought Agbeka, and probably not the guy who fought the last 4 or 5 rounds against Mabuza, and he got a draw there. And then in December, with Agbeka in the rematch, it was basically the same fight as their first one, except the roles were reversed, and Agbeka was the guy who was, just a step faster, just a step better. Last night, Perez was, let's be honest, he looked awful out there. I don't know if he's having problems making weight at 118, which a lot of people are thinking maybe he is, but, whatever it was, he just was not ready for what Darchinyan brought to the table.
I got the sense, watching his interviews and seeing his attitude, that he was, I tweeted this, he was personally refreshed by being in Colombia and professionally completely unprepared. We don't really know for sure, but does that seem plausible?
Yeah, it does seem plausible because I don't think he had, world-class sparring down in Colombia. I mean, he did have talented fighters that he was sparring with. And Vic Darchinyan, let's be honest about him, too, you can't replicate his style in sparring. You'd have to have someone who fights like him, and there's no one who really fights like Vic Darchinyan. But at the same time, you can probably do better than they did. You can get better southpaw fighters in who can at least try to mimic Darchinyan and, that wind-up, load-up the left-hand style that he has. And Darchinyan was very vocal about how he was going to fight, And Vic has never been a guy who lies to the media in the lead-up to a fight. If he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it, or at least try to. So, if Perez in Colombia didn't have the right sparring, that could have played a factor. If he just wasn't physically hitting it as hard as he should have been, maybe that could have played a factor. But Perez just did not look like himself. Did not look good. He looked tired. He was throwing a lot of arm punches. It just was not the Yanni Perez we're used to seeing.
Yeah, I mean, how many jabs did he throw? 4? I mean, for a guy with a 5-inch reach advantage, you're throwing, I can't even remember jabs he was throwing. The only thing I would say, and we'll move on from this, I don't want to belabor the point, is, in an article that was written in the LA Times in 2010, it talked about how Gary Shaw followed Perez to Colombia, and he was shocked at his living conditions and wanted to give him money to get him out of there. And he was saying, listen, I can't ever leave. Part of me feels like he is so Colombian and he is so tied to where he's from that will always hold him back if he's unwilling to remove himself from that. And by the way, they didn't translate this last night. My girlfriend was watching, obviously Colombian. She said that after the post-fight interview, what's next for you, Yanni? You lost 2 in a row. He said he's going to go back to Colombia and train. They didn't translate that.
Yeah.
It's just, it seems like he reached his high point and now he's on the way back down.
Yeah, and he's 32 years old, so he's not young. He seems younger than he is because he really just got on the map globally in late 2009. So he's a little bit older than most people probably expect that he is when they just think about Yanni Perez coming up late 2009. He came onto the scene. He became an elite bantamweight at that time. But, you know, he's 32. He's had now 5 tough fights in a row against legitimate contenders. And, you know, as far as his Colombian ties, it has been, I think, probably a blessing and a curse. Obviously, I respect any fighter who's that proud of where they come from, and I respect Perez for wanting to stay there, and, you know, that's where his family is. He doesn't want to do the whole relocation thing and all that. But at the same time, you know, a lot of Colombian fighters fight cream puffs. Yanni's never done that. He's never even fought in Colombia. So he's been a far more legitimate Colombian fighter than a lot of them are, the likes of Edison Miranda or maybe Brave Prescott, who gets a lot of publicity but really isn't that good of a fighter. But maybe relocation at this point would be the best thing professionally for him. You know, I can't say for sure. I'm not in his head. I don't know what he thinks, but at this point, it might be something to think about.
Quickly, and then we'll move on. Victor Darchinyan, forever all of the things we're saying bad about Perez, Victor Darchinyan said exactly what he was going to do, and he did it. Crushed him. Looked great doing it at 35. He didn't knock Perez out, partly because I think Perez, despite the fact that he looked kind of bad, is a tough guy. But he was rocking Perez over and over and over again. Should he, at 35, though, should he get the winner of Mares and Agbeko if that fight ever happens?
You know, I think he's going to, because he's lost to both of them, and he's lost in 2 pretty competitive fights to those guys. Gary Shaw's already saying that if it looks like Agbeko's going to be out for too long of a period, that it doesn't make sense for Mares to sit around when Mares could go ahead and fight Darchinyan again. That's a fight people would love to see. It would disrupt the tournament, but
it'd be a great fight.
Yeah, and it was a great fight the first time. I think people would love to see it again. Darchinyan thinks he won that fight, so he'd obviously love to take it again. If not that, Darchinyan could, again, try to fight Nonito Donaire a second time. Donaire's the guy who kind of burst the bubble back in 2007 when he creamed Darchinyan with a left hook knockout in the 5th round. And since then, they've had stop-and-start talks to get that fight again. But it could happen if Donaire's promotional situation gets sorted out in a timely fashion.
All right, we're speaking with Scott Christ, managing editor of Bad Left Hook here on the McDonald's Hotline. All right, Scott, pardon me. You brought up one thing, and then we'll get into Pacquiao Mosley here in just a minute. You mentioned that the Berto-Ortiz fight, that was just a barn burner of a fight, fantastic affair. It did 1.5 million viewers, which is a lot on HBO, particularly for guys who, you know, people were very much unsure about. Let me play devil's advocate here. Tell me what I'm missing. Not here to downplay the numbers; they're great, but it was a weekend where an idiot like me and a bunch of other idiots got a free weekend on HBO and with DirecTV, and so did Dish Network. Did that play into the numbers?
Oh, I'm sure it had to have. I mean, it was also the weekend of the Game of Thrones premiere, which is a lot of people were looking forward to that. I'm sure a lot of people tuned into that. You know, HBO hyped the hell out of it. So if people were curious to see some high-level boxing that HBO offers, then I'm sure that played some part in it. I also do think it was just a good matchup, and Berto has always done at least fair ratings on HBO as far as I know, so which is part of why he gets such what seemed like drastically overpaid purses. Berto made $1.3 million for this fight, so
did he really?
Yeah, that was the reported number, $1.3 million for him. Ortiz was at $400,000.
That's how much. So, that's how much Jim Larrañaga is going to make at Miami for leaving George Mason.
Yeah.
That's insanity, and for finding a bunch of numbers too.
Yeah, he's had a bit of a sweetheart deal with HBO, who wanted to lock him up back when he was a hot prospect, and you know they did that, but at the same time they've given themselves some headaches with Berto looking for what were easier fights. A lot of people thought this was going to be an easier fight, and didn't quite turn out that way because Victor Ortiz looked really, really good at 147 pounds. All
right, let's move on to Pacquiao Mosley if we can. There's so much to talk about. Let's get into it early. I've been watching the 360s. I think they're good, but they're kind of unimpressive. What is your sense about how they've been?
You know, I thought the first episode was fine. I thought the second episode was pretty dull, and I think that a lot of it comes down to the fact that I don't think you can pitch Shane Mosley and Manny Pacquiao's personalities and come up with compelling reality TV. They're just too nice. They're not trash talkers. They're not guys who are going to, promise to tear the head off the other guy or, insult their wives or mothers or whatever that Ricardo Mayorga or Fernando Vargas might have done. They're very nice guys, very respectful guys. I think they have a world of respect for one another. And you're not even getting the usual possibly fabricated Pacquiao camp melodrama about, oh, he looks so terrible in training. And, they're just going, oh, yeah, it's a pretty good camp this time. It's the best one he's had in a while. So I don't think there's a whole lot of intrigue in looking into these camps unless you just want to look into the camps.
And what would you say right now? It's 2 weeks out. It's a little early to say. What would you say about the hype? Is it where it should be? Is it going to build a lot later? How would you characterize it at the current moment?
Usually big boxing fights like these pick up in the last week. I don't know, because this is the first time that Showtime has done a major pay-per-view in many years. And HBO has always been very good about getting the hype out there, and I don't know if Showtime will do exactly the same. I mean, it's no offense to Showtime. They're killing HBO in boxing this year. But it'll play a part in it. I think 24/7 would have been better with these two because they're much better at making it appear better than it probably actually is, as far as the fight and just the presentation of it leading up. The hype seems pretty quiet right now, and honestly, I think a bit of that might be that the audiences do cross over to some degree, and UFC 129 is such a huge, huge show. I don't know how many people are really excited to tune in, and I was listening earlier on the show, and you brought up the odds on Jake Shields, which, he's a really big underdog. You're talking about maybe a plus 350 being high.
Oh, I was just about to ask you about that. Let me put the numbers out for you, and I'll let you continue. Hold on. I pulled them up here. I was having a debate with a friend of mine about why I was so excited for the Pacquiao fight, because I am excited. I'm having a party for it. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. Believe me, I'm buying this one. But the odds on this one, Jake Shields was about plus 300, okay? Yeah. Shane Mosley is at plus 645 with Manny Pacquiao at minus 900. Like, that is the most non-competitive fight I have seen in some time, correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's even for a Pacquiao fight, where he's usually a very heavy favorite at this stage, or a Mayweather fight where he's a very heavy favorite. We're talking about really big odds here. I don't think too many people believe in Shane Mosley's chances. I think some people are giving him a puncher's chance. But we're talking about Shane Mosley, who's going to be going into the Hall of Fame in a few years, we're giving him a puncher's chance. So what kind of fight is that? And I'm not trying to downgrade the fight. It very well could be a very competitive fight. We all thought Marcos Maidana was going to knock the crap out of Eric Morales, and that didn't happen. So, it's a different fight, obviously, but I think it has the potential to be a good fight to watch, unless you're a really huge Shane Mosley fan and don't like Manny Pacquiao. Then you might not like it so much. But odds-wise and the way the fight is being perceived, I think everyone sees this as another kind of a walk-away win for Manny.
Well, let me ask you about an argument I was having with an MMA fan, and I was trying to defend the fight by saying the following. Listen, it's like, okay, the fight's available for him. I mean, he's beaten just about everyone except Mayweather. Mayweather was at the Berto Ortiz fight, which another story in of itself. Maybe he gets back into boxing. Who knows? But whatever. But the point I was trying to make, he was arguing, why is this fight being celebrated? It's completely non-competitive. If you look at down the line of the guys George St. Pierre's fought, he's fought number one contenders for years, fight in, fight out. That's legitimate. And sort of my response was, I can't argue with it. It's not competitive. But Manny Pacquiao is, I think, bigger than his own sport. He gets people to watch boxing who don't give an F about boxing. And that's very different than like casual UFC fans who catch one here, catch one there. He is another level of a popular figure without peer. Is that why this is compelling? Is that why we watch Manny Pacquiao?
I think that's absolutely why. It goes back to Mike Tyson, and Oscar De La Hoya for recent examples. People who don't care about boxing would watch Mike Tyson, would watch Oscar De La Hoya fight. They will watch Manny Pacquiao fight, and a lot of them will also watch Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight whenever he does fight. I don't think it's any more about competitive fights, because most of us, I believe, think that the only truly competitive fight for Manny Pacquiao is Floyd Mayweather Jr., which at the earliest is probably going to happen next year, if ever. So right now we're talking about, Pacquiao fighting Mosley, which most people don't think is competitive at all, and by most I mean pretty much everybody. And then in November he'll fight again against, maybe Juan Manuel Marquez, maybe someone else. We don't know yet. But it's exactly why, because Manny Pacquiao has become a phenomenal attraction that people think they need to see.
Let me ask you, and this is another point that was brought up, and I'd like to get your response. I think, listen, Manny's a success, right? I mean, 2 shows, Dallas Cowboys Stadium, between them pulling in approximately $12 million in gate. But again, I'm talking about some arguments I've had with MMA fans. They say, well, okay, sucker. I mean, no doubt about it, St. Pierre is not Manny Pacquiao. He's super popular, but he's not Manny Pacquiao. Neither is Jake Shields. And that card is pulling in $11 million, which is almost what the 2 Pacquiao shows at Dallas Cowboys Stadium put together. And the Clottey fight did $750K in pay-per-views, and the Margarito fight did really good at $1.15 million. But, for a guy who's the number 1 combat athlete on the planet, shouldn't he be doing greater numbers? What is your response to that?
Well, I think there's also the worldwide factor. I think Manny Pacquiao globally translates more than anyone in MMA, and that's no shot at anyone in MMA. Pacquiao is, again, a phenomenal attraction at this point. As far as the gates go, and you brought this up too, and I was going to actually say the same thing if I got the chance. Canadian fight fans are insane. I mean, they're awesome. They turn out for boxing in huge droves up in Montreal too to see Lucien Boutte fight. God knows who he's going to fight whenever he fights. I mean, they don't care who he's against. They turn out and they come out. They come out for Jean Pascal fights. They think he did about 16,000 with Bernard Hopkins, which was probably the biggest crowd Hopkins has fought in front of in years. And they'll probably do about the same number, if not a few thousand more, next time at the Bell Center on May 21st. But, Canadian fight fans are definitely making that a huge show. I think if you stuck Manny Pacquiao up in Montreal or Toronto, he could do a huge, huge house. But as far down in Dallas, I think both of those shows kind of underwhelmed from what Bob Arum or a lot of other people were expecting them to do. Obviously, they did very, very good business, but they probably could have made more money doing it in front of far less fans in Vegas just from the site fee and, ticket prices being amped up and all of that. But, as far as Pacquiao drawing a number like a UFC show, I don't think that's going to happen. A big UFC show like this one, frankly, mixed martial arts is a hotter sport. I mean, I don't know anyone who could logically argue against that because boxing basically is Pacquiao Mayweather whenever he gets around to it. And then a bunch of guys that everyone's trying to build seemingly with no real clue of how to make them the next great star.
All right. For people who are interested in boxing fans, they can go to badlefthook.com. Ton of great stuff there. Give us a sense really quick, though. You got just a couple minutes. What's on the horizon? Okay, Pacquiao Mosley is the big one, for sure. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, though, what can boxing fans or MMA fans who are looking to get interested in boxing, what can they look for in the next few weeks?
Well, on May 14th, you have the Super 6 World Boxing Classic coming back with Andre Ward against Arthur Abraham, which is a lot of people think it's going to be a mismatch, but this is basically do or die for Arthur Abraham's career as an elite fighter, so he might actually have to turn it up in the early rounds instead of waiting around like he usually does. And Andre Ward's maybe the next good American star. He's a really good fighter. He's pretty entertaining, and Andre is the kind of guy who will fight dirty if he has to, which is a lot of guys won't do that anymore. He's kind of old school in that respect. May 21st, we have Hopkins and Pascal again up in Montreal this time instead of Quebec City. So it should be an even bigger, even hotter crowd. You get into June, you've got Julio Cesar Chavez coming back, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I don't want to confuse the two, for his first HBO fight on June 4th, which could be an interesting fight because he might be doing something bigger later in the year. June 18th, Saul Canelo Alvarez is back on HBO in a very tough fight against Ryan Rhodes. Oh,
I had no idea. Nice. Okay.
Yeah, that one could be a really tough fight for as young as Canelo is. And Rhodes is, he's kind of under the radar here with U.S. fans because he's from the UK, but he's a very tough, very experienced fighter. Will definitely be the biggest test for Canelo at this point. And then, we'll get later in the year. Klitschko and Hay are fighting on July 2nd. And Vitaly Klitschko is going to fight Tomasz Adamek on September 10th. And it looks like Cotto Margarito 2 on September 17th.
Size for that one. All right, for more information and lots of good stuff, follow him on Twitter, twitter.com/badlefthook. And, of course, you can get more at badlefthook.com. Scott, Chris, thank you very much. Appreciate you being on the show. We'll have you on again, I guess, after the fights. So thanks a lot, buddy.
All right, thank you.
Take care. All right, went very long with that one. Let's go to break right now. We come back. We'll get back into MMA. Let's break down, do some predictions. UFC 129. So get your predictions in now. Get on the hook. 800-636-1067. Who are your predictions for UFC 129? Get them ready and state your case. I'm going to make mine on the other side of this break. 800-636-1067. MMA Nation 1067 The Fan.